The tectonic plates of our global reality didn't just shift yesterday, they shattered. We woke up to a world map that had been doused in gasoline and set ablaze while we slept. For 25 years, the socialist regime in Venezuela was an unshakable monolith, a fortress of defiance against Washington. It was the chronic migraine of the Western Hemisphere, a seemingly indestructible hub of anti-American hatred, a nerve center for global drug trafficking, and an eager puppet for our greatest geopolitical rivals, Russia, China, and Iran. Conventional wisdom screamed that this regime was made of concrete. We were lectured by experts that the entrenched military leadership, the notorious cartel of the Suns, and the sheer momentum of the dictatorship made Nicolas Maduro untouchable. The experts were wrong. We were all wrong. In the suffocating blackness before dawn, on January 3rd, 2026, the impossible became history, under the cover of a catastrophic electrical blackout that plunged Caracas into an abyssal void, a void we now know was not a grid failure, but a deliberate induced coma by U.S. cyber warfare assets. Elite operators from Delta Force sliced through the perimeter of Fuerte Tiuna. They didn't knock, they didn't negotiate, they entered with surgical violence, neutralized the regime's Praetorian Guard, and extracted the most wanted man in the hemisphere without spilling a single drop of American blood. But as the sun crested over the Caribbean and the first humiliating images of a captured Maduro in U.S. custody flooded social media, the narrative took a sharp, unforeseen turn. The initial roar of global celebration was almost instantly strangled by a wave of confusion and, in certain capitals, cold terror, because when President Trump took the podium at Mar-a-Lago, he didn't announce he was handing over power. He didn't announce that the long-suffering opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, would be inaugurated. He announced a trusteeship. He looked the world dead in the eye and declared that the United States government is now effectively the government of Venezuela. We are going to run the country. Those 6 words have shredded the rulebook of international relations. We are no longer discussing regime change. We have crossed the threshold into direct nation management. We are witnessing the United States seizing physical and administrative control of the planet's largest proven oil reserves and declaring that it, and only it, will decide when, how, and if sovereignty is returned. This represents the most aggressive, kinetic application of American power since the tanks rolled into Baghdad. But make no mistake, the blueprint Trump laid out is not Iraq. It is not nation-building in the idealistic sense. This is a corporate, military, and political hostile takeover designed to strip a bankrupt country of its assets to finance its own liberation. It is the Take the Oil Doctrine, once a campaign slogan, now made flesh and blood. Today, we are going to dissect exactly what transpired during those chaotic, history-making hours in Caracas. We are going to rip apart the trusteeship model that the Trump administration is currently installing. We are going to identify the clear winners, American energy giants, the U.S. consumer, and the devastated losers, the Venezuelan ruling class, Moscow and Beijing. And we are going to confront the question hanging in the air, the one nobody seems to have an answer for: how exactly does America extract itself from this? Before we dive into the granular details of this historic operation, I have a request. We are tracking this situation as it evolves, minute by minute. The world is changing fast. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and understand the new reality, you need to be subscribed to this channel. Go ahead and click that subscribe button, smash the bell icon, and ensure your notifications are turned on so you don't miss a beat. And I want to hear your gut instinct right now. Is the U.S. running Venezuela a necessary, harsh measure to restore order, or is this a dangerous act of old-school imperialism? Hit the like button if you believe Trump made the hard but right call. Drop a comment if you think this is a catastrophe in the making. Let's get into the analysis. To truly grasp the magnitude of this political earthquake, we first have to appreciate the absolute military precision that triggered the tremors. Operation Absolute Resolve was not some frantic gamble. It was the crescendo of months of tightening pressure. If you have been paying close attention to the news ticker over the last 6 months, you've seen the breadcrumbs leading to this moment. The reports of mysterious explosions taking out radar sites along the Venezuelan coastline, the aggressive seizure of drug-running vessels in the Caribbean by U.S. naval assets operating aggressively close to Venezuelan waters, the strategic positioning of the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group just hovering outside the exclusionary zone. The chessboard was being set piece by piece. President Trump confirmed yesterday that he gave the final green light for the strike only after intelligence confirmed that Maduro was consolidating his entire inner circle within Fuerte Tiuna, that massive military complex in Caracas, because he was terrified of a coup from his own generals. Maduro believed that base was his fortress. In the end, it turned out to be his trap. According to deep defense sources and the sparse details trickling out of the Pentagon, the operation kicked off with an overwhelming cyber and electronic warfare barrage. At roughly 02 Dars local time, the power grid in Caracas didn't just flicker, it died. This wasn't the standard brownout Venezuelans live with. This was a total systems kill. Cellular networks evaporated. Military communications frequencies were jammed with static. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off, as Trump described it, manufacturing a dark and deadly environment perfect for the raid. Under this terrifying blanket of electronic silence, U.S. special operators inserted via helicopter. The resistance they encountered was described as intense but incredibly brief. The president boasted that no nation in the world could achieve what America achieved, and the military reality supports the boast. The fact that U.S. forces could breach the most heavily fortified square mile in South America, snatch the head of state and his wife, Celia Flores, and vanish into the night without a scratch is a testament to an insurmountable advantage in night vision capabilities and close-quarters battle proficiency. But let's stop and focus on the image Trump decided to share. That photo of Maduro on the ship. This wasn't just proof of life, it was a calculated psychological warhead. By displaying the strongman blindfolded, his hands zip-tied, sitting on the cold deck like a common street criminal, the U.S. shattered the myth of invincibility that has shielded the Chavista regime for decades. It was a violent message sent directly to every other authoritarian leader in the region. You are not safe. Your palaces are not safe. Your armies cannot save you. Maduro is now sitting in a federal detention cell in New York, staring down charges of narco-terrorism, indictments that have been gathering dust since 2020. The DOJ has spent years building the case that he turned Venezuela into a narco state, utilizing government machinery to flood the U.S. with cocaine and weaponizing migration. These are the legal justifications. But let's be honest, international law becomes a very fuzzy concept when you have a carrier strike group parked off the coast. The real story, however, isn't the arrest itself. Dictators get toppled. The real story is the uncharted territory of what happens next. In the standard playbook, when a dictator falls, a transition council is formed. The opposition leader steps into the void. The international community gathers. Aid money is pledged. Elections are scheduled. That is absolutely not what is happening here. President Trump was asked explicitly about the transition plan. He was asked about Maria Corina Machado, the woman who dominated the opposition primaries, the woman who risked execution to fight for democracy. Trump's answer was a devastating blow to the traditional opposition. He simply said, she does not have the support. He dismissed her. In one breath, he dismissed the entire Venezuelan political class. Instead of pointing to a Venezuelan, he pointed to his own cabinet. He pointed to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He pointed to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. He declared, the people standing right behind me, we are going to be running it. You need to let that sink in. The executive branch of the United States government is claiming direct administrative authority over a sovereign Latin American nation. Trump stated that the U.S. will run Venezuela until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. What does judicious actually mean here? It means done with good judgment. And whose judgment matters? Only Donald Trump's. Why is he taking this path? Why not just hand the keys to Machado and walk away? There are two driving forces here. One is political, and the other is pure economics. Politically, Trump has zero trust in the Venezuelan opposition. He views the entire political ecosystem of Caracas as compromised. He believes that even the good guys have been forced to cut deals with the devil just to survive. He worries that if he hands power to a fragile coalition, the remnants of the Chavista military, the guys with the guns who weren't arrested, will just launch a counter-coup in 6 months. He said it explicitly. We don't want to be involved with having someone else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. He wants a totally clean slate. and he is convinced that the only way to get a clean slate is to impose one from the outside. But the bigger reason, the real underlying driver, is the oil. Venezuela is sitting on the largest proven oil reserves on the planet, bigger than Saudi Arabia, bigger than Russia, but right now those reserves are useless dirt. The infrastructure is rusted through, the pipelines are leaking, the technical expertise fled years ago. PDVSA, the state oil company, is a hollowed out shell stuffed with corruption. Trump looks at Venezuela and he doesn't just see a humanitarian disaster, he sees a distressed asset, he sees a company run into the ground by incompetent management, and he wants to execute a hostile takeover to turn it around. He was incredibly blunt about this intention. He said, we're going to have our very large United States oil companies go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And here's the kicker. He claimed the operation won't cost us a penny because the U.S. will be reimbursed directly from the oil revenue. This is a fundamental shift in the philosophy of how America wages war. In the past, the U.S. spent trillions in Iraq and Afghanistan and got very little in return financially. Trump has always hated that deal. He has always argued that we should have kept the oil. Well, now he is keeping the oil. The plan is to treat Venezuela like a bankrupt corporation in receivership. The U.S. military provides security. U.S. oil majors, ExxonMobil, Chevron, provide capital and expertise to rebuild extraction. The revenue goes first to paying back the U.S. and then presumably to the Venezuelan people. It's a trusteeship. It's the paternalistic idea that the Venezuelan people are currently incapable of managing their own resources due to the total destruction of their institutions, so Uncle Sam will manage it for them. I want to pause here because this is the most explosive part of the plan. Trump is essentially proposing a corporate restructuring of a nation state. Some might say, finally, someone is going to fix the oil and use the money to actually help the people. Others might say, this is colonialism, plain and simple. Where do you stand? Is this smart business or dangerous imperialism? Drop a comment below with smart or dangerous and tell me why. Now let's widen our lens, because this isn't just a story about Caracas and Washington. This is about the global balance of power. For 20 years, Venezuela has been the beachhead for America's enemies in the Western Hemisphere. Russia used it as a parking lot for nuclear-capable bombers. China loaned nearly $60 billion securing oil and influence. Iran used it as a forward operating base. Cuba depends on Venezuelan oil just to keep its lights on. In one single night, Trump kicked the legs out from under that entire table. By seizing Maduro and declaring that the U.S. is running the country, Trump has effectively expropriated the investments of Beijing and Moscow. Those loans China made, good luck collecting them from a U.S.-administered government. Those Russian arms deals, canceled. The silence coming from Beijing and Moscow right now is deafening. Yes, they issued standard statements condemning the kidnapping, but notice what they aren't doing. They aren't moving troops. They aren't threatening war. Why? Because Trump called their bluff. He calculated that Xi Jinping is too worried about his own slowing economy to fight a war over a failed state in the Caribbean. He calculated that Putin is too bogged down in Ukraine to open a second front in the Americas. This sends a terrifying message to other U.S. adversaries. Your protection doesn't work. We can reach out and touch your allies, and there is nothing you can do about it. But there is a specific country sweating bullets right now, Colombia. Gustavo Petro, the leftist president of Colombia, has been one of Maduro's few remaining lifelines. He has tried to normalize relations and play mediator. Trump had a message for him too. He warned Colombia to be wary. He said, we want to surround ourselves with good neighbors. This is a barely veiled threat. The U.S. is signaling it will no longer tolerate Latin American governments playing footsie with dictators. This is the revival of the Monroe Doctrine on steroids. The Monroe Doctrine said, Europe, stay out. The Trump Doctrine of 2026 seems to be, the Americas are our backyard, and we will mow the lawn whenever we see fit. However, we have to talk about the risks, because while the raid was clean, the occupation is going to be messy. Trump said the U.S. is ready for boots on the ground. He said, we're not afraid of boots on the ground. This is where the Vietnam and Iraq comparisons creep in. Capturing Maduro is one thing. Pacifying a country of 30 million people, many radicalized by decades of anti-American propaganda, is a completely different animal. There are thousands of armed paramilitaries, the colectivos. There are remnants of ELN and FARC guerrillas. There is the Tren de Aragua gang. If these groups fight an insurgency against the Yankee invaders, U.S. troops could be drawn into a long, bloody guerrilla war in the jungles and slums. We could see IEDs in Caracas, ambushes on oil convoys. Trump seems to believe that without the head of the snake, without Maduro and his money, these groups will collapse or can be bought off. He's betting the Venezuelan people are so exhausted and hungry that they will welcome the Americans as liberators, or at least tolerate them if the lights come back on. It's a massive gamble. The reaction on the ground is mixed. In Miami, Doral is a party. Champagne is popping. To the exile community, Trump is a hero. They see this as the end of a nightmare. But in Caracas, the mood is different. There is hope, yes, but also fear. People are staying indoors, waiting to see if the gringos are here to help or conquer. And then there is the legal aspect. The U.S. Constitution does not exactly have a clause for running a foreign country. There will be challenges in Congress. Democrats are already calling this an illegal act of war, but Trump doesn't care about legal niceties. He cares about results. He is operating on the principle that possession is 9/10 of the law. He has the guy, he has the ships, he has the oil fields. Who is going to stop him? The Supreme Court, the UN, the OAS? Trump views these institutions as toothless tigers. So, what happens next? In the coming days, watch for 3 specific things. The oil majors. Watch for official announcements from Chevron and Exxon. If they start moving heavy equipment, the deal is done. The purge. Watch what happens to the rest of the Chavista leadership. Are they arrested? Do they flee? Or do they cut a deal? Trump's judicious transition might involve keeping some of the old guard in place, which would be highly controversial. The resistance. Watch for attacks on U.S. forces. If the colectivos start shooting, this victory could turn into a grinding occupation quickly. We are witnessing the death of the post-Cold War order. For decades, the U.S. used soft power and diplomacy. When we used force, we wrapped it in international coalitions. Trump has thrown that out. This is naked hard power. It is transactional, unilateral. America first applied to conquest. He is saying, we have the power, we have the interest, and we are going to take control to fix the problem. It creates a precedent that is both seductive and terrifying. Seductive because it solves a problem that has festered for decades. Maduro is gone. The drugs might stop. The oil might flow. Terrifying because if the U.S. can just decide to run Venezuela today, who is next? What happens if the U.S. decides to run Mexico to stop cartels or a Middle Eastern country? We have entered a new era of imperial management. The U.S. is no longer just the world's policeman. It is becoming the world's bankruptcy court and restructuring firm. And like any hostile takeover, there will be blood on the floor before the restructuring is complete. This story is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning. We are going to be producing deep dive videos on the Venezuelan oil industry, the military tactics used, and the shadow cabinet Trump is installing. You do not want to miss those. So please make sure you are subscribed. It helps the channel, but more importantly, it keeps you informed in a world that is getting crazier by the day. And I have a question for the history buffs. Does this remind you more of the U.S. occupation of Japan in 1945 or the U.S. invasion of Panama in 1989? I'm reading every comment in the first hour, so give me your best historical parallel below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay skeptical, and keep your eyes on the horizon. I want to address the economic elephant in the room, the debt. Venezuela owes roughly $150 billion to creditors. Wall Street bondholders, China, Russia, arbitration awards. When Trump says we're going to run the country, he is also stepping into the middle of the world's biggest bankruptcy case. Wall Street investors have been buying up defaulted Venezuelan bonds, hoping for this moment. They hope a US-backed government will pay them back. But Trump's America First reimbursement plan complicates this. If the oil revenue goes to reimbursing the US military first and then to rebuilding, there might be nothing left for bondholders. And what about China's debt? $10–15 billion. Do you think Donald Trump is going to prioritize paying back the CCP with Venezuelan oil money? Absolutely not. He might declare that debt odious, a legal term meaning the debt was incurred by a dictatorship against the interests of the people. If the U.S. cancels Venezuela's debt to China, that is economic warfare. It sets a precedent that could blow up China's Belt and Road Initiative. If countries think they can just have a U.S.-backed coup and default on Chinese loans, Beijing is going to panic. This is why I say this isn't just about Maduro. This is a global financial reset disguised as a military intervention. Also, consider the oil price. Venezuela produces heavy crude. The exact type U.S. refineries in the Gulf Coast are built to process. Since we sanctioned Venezuelan oil, U.S. refineries have been inefficient. Bringing Venezuelan oil back online is a massive stimulus for the U.S. refining industry. It means cheaper gas for you. Trump knows this. He is looking at the 2026 midterms. I brought gas prices down to $1.50 as a powerful slogan, and if he has to occupy a country to do it, he's betting the American voter won't care, as long as the capture was clean and the gas is cheap. It's a cynical calculation, but geopolitics is rarely about morality, it's about interests. And right now, the interests of the U.S., the Venezuelan people who want Maduro gone, and the global energy market have aligned. The danger, of course, is hubris. Mission accomplished moments have a way of aging poorly. Right now, Trump looks like a genius strategist, but let's see where we are in 6 months. Let's see if the lights stay on. Let's see if the oil flows. Let's see if the Venezuelan people accept this trusteeship. Because if they don't, the U.S. military is going to find out that running a country is a lot harder than invading one.